Onshape is a computer-aided design software system utilized for product and machinery design across many industries. Industries such as consumer electronics, mechanical machinery, medical devices, 3D printing, machine parts, and industrial equipment. With this, we are able to accomplish the prerequisite of our course, CAD/CAM with automation, which is to form 5 members, work as a group in designing any object using Onshape, and make a tutorial video out of it. The design that we would like to discuss is an airplane.
In this video, we're going to first create the wheel block part. Start the sketch with inches work units. Click on a new sketch, use the right sketch plane. Right click and view it normal to sketch plane. Use a corner rectangle and click on the origin. Pull the first corner down to the right with a width of 0.75 and height of 0.8751. Now we have a center point for the hole. Go along the bottom edge looking for the midpoint, then drag the mouse along a projected line. Click to make the center of the circle coincident to the midpoint of the bottom edge. Click and input 0.25 circle for the hole. This has a distance from the center point. Distance from the center point of the circle to the bottom edge of 0.25. Now the corners are rounded. Let's use another sketch fillet and click on these two outside edges and set the fillet at 0.125 or 1/8 of an inch. And again on this other side, these two edges are also fillet at 1/8. With those fillets added, the sketch is complete. So click on the checkbox and change to isometric view. Choose extrude and click on the profile. Set it going to the left and as a total depth of 2 inches. Accept that and now we have wheel block is created. Next, we're going to create this horizontal stabilizer. Start in the parts to draw in inches. Choose a sketch on the top sketch plane. Then view normal to the sketch plane. Start with a center point rectangle and use the origin as the center of this rectangle. It's 2 inches between the centers of the rounded ends. Now 2-inch square is made. Use arc tool and this is going to be a center point arc. Come to this side, we can look for the square midpoint. Click that as the center of the arc. Click on the end point to be coincidental and the other end point to create that rounded end. Do the same thing on this other side. Midpoint for the center, end point, and end point. And with this, the profile sketch is created. End the sketch and choose isometric. Use extrude. Use a window to choose the profile. In this case, it will be a thickness of 0.25 extruded in the vertical direction. Then accept that. In this part, we're going to create the vertical stabilizer. Start a new part to draw in inches. And click on the sketch and use the right sketch plane. View normal to sketch. Start with a center point circle. Click on the origin to establish the center and this has a radius of 0.5 or a diameter of 1. And with that set, use line tool and it has to be tangent to this outside edge. Click and set the distance at 0.75. Click again and this is 1.5 or horizontal distance. And now we have a line that goes from the end point and needs to be coincident and tangent to the circle. And so that creates the profile. Accept it and choose isometric. Use a window to choose that profile. Extrude. And it has a depth or thickness of 0.25.
This part, we're going to create the wings. Start a new part studio in inches. Start a sketch and put it on the top sketch plane. Right-click and view normal to the sketch plane. Use a center point rectangle. Use the origin as the center point. Click and set the distance horizontally at 8 inches and width at 2. That creates the center part of the wing. Now we have the rounded end, so use the center point arc and look for the square midpoint of this end line to use as the center of the arc. Click on the end point for the start and the end point for the end. Do the same at the other end, midpoint, end point, and end. Now we have some holes here, so use the center point circle and make this coincident to this end line. Click set this at point 25 and then use dimension tool to go from this edge to the center of the hole is going to be 0.5. We have another hole on the other side, so again, use a center point circle coincident to the end line. Set this circle at the center distance at 0.5 again from this outside edge. For its diameter, use a equal constraint and use these two circles equal to each other for the holes. Now, to make the holes at the other side, first make a center line. Make this coincident to the origin and the middle of the wing and create a center line. With this, use a mirror. Choose the center line as a mirror line. Choose these two holes. Place those at the other end, right-click, and escape mirror. Accept the sketch. Right-click and isometric. Use extrude and click on the wing. Put thickness to 5 and it's extruded vertically. Accept the sketch. In this part, we're going to create the propeller. Start a new part studio in inches. Start a sketch and put this on the front sketch plane. Right-click and view normal to the sketch plane. Start with a construction line that's the same length as the distance between the centers. Draw a vertical construction line and set the length at 3 inches. Use a midpoint constraint. Choose the construction line as the origin. Now, this construction line will use under the offset. With the slot command, and choose the construction line, and it will automatically create the slot. Reduce this point to 5. The diameter here is 0.5. Accept that by hitting enter or return to the keyboard. We have a 1/4 inch hole, so use a center point circle and snap that to the origin. Click and make this point 0.5 hole in the center. Accept sketch. Right-click, go to isometric, use extrude feature, and set depth at 0.25. In this part, we're going to create this propeller pin. Start a new part studio in inches. Start a sketch and place this on the front sketch plane and then right-click and view normal to the sketch plane. We need to have a center line that we can use for the revolve, so choose line and construction. Make this coincident to the origin and vertical. Now, start drawing the pin. Start coincident to the origin, and then draw horizontal and a vertical line. Add dimensions using center line. From this side of the shaft to the center line, this gives a total width of 0.25. The height of the shaft itself is 0.5. Next, add the rounded head. In this, use a center point arc. Project over vertical coincident to the origin. Project it from the end of that line. That will be the center. Click out there and then vertical with the origin here. Now, put 0.375 on radius and then slash 4 divided by 2 that will give me the radius. Using line command, now connect these endpoints and also connect the endpoint back down to the origin to create this profile. Accept it. Next, choose revolve and that profile. For the revolve axis, use center line that we created earlier and then accept the sketch plane.
In this part, we're going to create this wheel. Start a new parts to draw in inches. Start a sketch and put this on the front sketch plane. Right click and choose view normal to sketch point. Start by a center line, so use line tool. Choose construction and create a center line going through the origin. Next, create a circle. Use a center point circle. This must be projected above the origin. Click and set this diameter at 0.375. Use dimension tool and dimension the center of this circle. Click on the center line, which will give a total distance of 0.625 to set the distance between the two centers of the upper and lower circle. Next, draw a corner rectangle and draw this rectangle so it's a little bit larger than the circle. Right-click at the end of the rectangle command. Now use the dimension tool and now the bottom edge of this rectangle to the center line. Click on that. This makes the size of the center hole, which is 0.25. Then from the top edge of this rectangle to the center line and pull down below. Set the overall height of 0.45. Now, the width of the hub is actually the same as the circle, so use a tangent and set the edge of this rectangle tangent to the circle. This edge of the rectangle tangent to the circle. With that, it's fully constrained. Accept that. Right-click and choose isometric view. Use revolve feature. Choose this profile. Use a window to choose that profile. Click on center line to have a revolve axis. Accept sketch and done. Start a new part studio in inches. Start the sketch and put this on the right sketch plane. Left click and view normal to the sketch plane. Use a corner rectangle and stretch this out to the right. This is going to be 10 inches long and 2 inches high. It needs to be centered on the origin, so use a midpoint constraint. The midpoint of this line must be coincident to the origin. Next, use another corner rectangle for this notch along the bottom edge. Make the first point coincident to this bottom line for 2 inches long and 0.25 inches high. Use a dimension tool. The dimension from the front edge to the front edge of this notch is 2 inches. Next, use a center point circle to create this hole and put the circle there. The diameter from the circle to the front edge is 4.5. Click the center point of the circle to the top edge and it's going to be 0.125 inches. Put the angles on the back. Use a line tool, then start coincident with top edge and make this coincident to the back. Use dimension from this back edge to that front point, and this is 4 inches and the angle will be 10 degrees. Likewise on the bottom, snap the bottom edge into the back edge. The dimension from the back edge to this line is 5 and the angle is 10 degrees. Last is use a line tool to put this notch in the back edge and make it coincident to this angled line and perpendicular it at 0.25 and coincident to this back edge, and that distance is 2. And accept this sketch. Right click and go to the isometric view. Extrude this profile and click Symmetric to the right plane and have a depth of 1.25. Accept the extrude, and this is the first feature in making the body of the airplane. Start the new sketch and use the top of the block as my sketch plane. Right click and view normal to the sketch plane and rotate it until it's running horizontally across the screen. Use the line command and coincident to this edge and coincident to the back edge. From this back edge to the end point of this line, the dimension is 4.5 and an angle of 5 degrees. Use construction or center line from the midpoint of this back edge and stretch this horizontally along here. The center line will be used for a mirror. Click on the mirror, then select the center line and select that edge or the line to form the mirrored object. Right click and escape the mirror and finish the sketch. Right click and go to isometric. Use extrudes to remove these areas we just created. Select True All and accept it. The next feature is chamfer. Click the chamfer tool, then choose distance and angle and set the distance into 1 inch and the angle in 14 degrees. Choose the front edge and reverse this arrow to be in the correct way. Then select these edges and the bottom edges. Accept the feature. Change the isometric view. There's a 1/4 inch hole in the very front center of the airplane from the propeller. Start the sketch and put it on the front plane and add a point on the origin. Add a hole feature. Click on the point that we added and the setting will be simple. Blind, drilled, and going to be a 1/4 inch and an inch deep. Accept the feature. Round the corners outside edges of the plane using the fillet feature, and the setting should be 0.125 and choose an individual edge. The area for the wing or the horizontal stabilizer or around the cockpit will not be rounded. Accept it, and now the body of the airplane is finished.
Step 9. Wheel Sub-Assembly. We're now going to create a sub-assembly of the wheel block and the wheels. In the assembly window, we use the Insert tool and it shows a list of all the parts that are in this document. Choose the wheel block and click once to place that into the assembly. Also, click on the wheel and place 2 wheels on the assembly window. Then close the Insert menu. So in this case, we're going to assemble these items. Next, we're going to mate the wheels to the wheel block using a revolute mate to be able to turn. Set the first mate at the end of the axle hole in the wheel block. Make sure we have that axle hole itself and click for the first mate. Then go to the wheel itself and make sure we have just the end of the hole. Use an offset and put -1/32 inches, and that will give a little bit of space so the wheel will turn. Accept that feature. Now, create a similar mate, the same mate on the other side. Use a revolute again to the end of the axle hole and to the end of the hole in the wheel. Let's hit solve to put that up there. Again, click the offset and set it to -1/32 inches to see the space in between. Accept that and go to the isometric view. Now we have the wheel set with a mate. Next, we need an axle to go in, and we're going to create this axle in context during an assembly. To do this, create a mate connector on the end of this wheel. So go right to the end of that hole and create a mate connector. It shows up here under the mate features. Accept that, and this is what I need to be able to create my axle. On the menu here, create a part studio in context. There's a box here that says the origin of the new part, and choose the mate connector and accept it. So now go back to the part studio. But I can see the parts in my assembly and use information from those when I'm creating this part. In this case, start a new sketch and click the end of this wheel. Right-click and view normal to the sketch plane. I'll use my use command to this hole that was in the wheel for the axle to define the axle. Accept this sketch, then go to the isometric view. Use extrude and choose that sketch. Go in the other direction and go up to the next face to use the outside edge of this wheel as the defining length of the part. So use the information from my assembled pieces to help this create this part. Accept that and the axle has been created. Click on Insert and go to Assembly. And now I'm back in my assembly and the axle has been inserted. So in this case, use a fasten mate and fasten this mate connector that I created earlier to the end of the axle. Solve this and put it back together and accept that. Hide this mate connector and now I've created this wheel block. The wheels can spin, the axle is there, and this can be inserted into the airplane assembly. Step 10. Wing Sub-Assembly. We're now going to create another sub-assembly of wings. First, click the plus, create an assembly, and get a new assembly window or tab. Insert one wing and another wing because this is a biplane. And now we will assemble this as a sub-assembly. Set up a relationship between the wings by using a fasten mate. And fasten this hole and they will snap together. But they're actually separated here. For the separation, create an offset. The offset is going to be a Z offset and it will be from those two faces. The value will be 2.25 and that will create the space in between. Accept this. Now we need the wing struts that are going to connect together. To do that, first, click on Create a Mate Connector and create a mate connector right on the top edge of this hole in the top wing and accept that and use this for creating a part studio in context. Click on this. I need to have a mate connector to be the origin of my new part studio, so I'm going to use that mate connector I just created. Accept it. And now we are in a new part studio with the information from our wings available. Create a new sketch and click on the Stop Sketch Plane. Right-click and view normal to the sketch plane. And the strut is going to be the same size as a hole, so use this existing hole. I'm going to click on that so that it's selected and that actually becomes available and becomes my sketch. So accept that. Right-click and go back to isometric. Use an extrude. Choose that hole for that sketch and select the next face. And the next face will be the bottom of this bottom wing. Now my strut extends all the way down to the bottom there and accept it. After that, I can insert this wing strut into the assembly. Use a fasten and mate connector and fasten it from the mate connector up here in the end of the strut. Click Solve and put it back together. We'll accept this. Turn off the visibility of that mate connector. Now put the 3 more struts in here. We can use the replicate tool because we have already created this part and the part has a mate connector on it. For the instances in the replicate tool, click the strut. It needs to be matched edges of face. And for faces, click on this face. This finds each of the instances, each of those holes, and it replicates what was in this hole. So the struts and mate connectors have been created. Accept that and I can turn off the visibility of these mate connectors. And with that, I have created a subset assembly of the wings for my biplane. This can be inserted into our airplane assembly.
Before doing that, let's first clean up the document. Down here, looking at the tabs, click and choose Rename and then type each part to give classification for easier assembly. While at it, might as well improve the appearance of each part. To do that, select a part, right-click, and edit appearance. After that is over with, we can finally make the assembly. Start by clicking the plus sign on the lower left corner and create assembly. Use the insert list, click body and wing assembly, start with a fasten mate. Get the front edge on this top surface. Select when the Z-axis or the blue color is pointing down, and mate it with the midpoint of the wing with the Z-axis pointing up. Then accept. Go back to insert and this time put in wheel assembly. Again, use fasten mate. Use midpoint of the wing with the Z-axis pointing down. Soon after, go to the wheel block and mate it with that front edge on this top surface with the Z-axis pointing up. Solve that and then accept. Again, insert horizontal and vertical stabilizer. For horizontal stabilizer, use fastened. Go to the top front edge, Z-axis pointing up. Come back to this point. Along this edge, click on this surface and then accept. Moving on to the vertical stabilizer, use fastened, go to the surface, go to the middle with the Z-axis pointing up, get the bottom surface, this edge with the Z-axis pointing down, solve that, then accept. Go back to insert, and this time around, put in the propeller pin and the propeller. Next, fasten the pin into the hole on the front of the airplane. Then solve. To make space for the propeller to go in, C offset the pin going into the body with a thickness of -0.125. Then accept. To continue, make the propeller spin. Use revolve mate. Take the hole on the end of the body and the propeller. Then accept. The last step is animating the propeller. Click on Revolute, choose Animate, then Play. If you want to make it spin faster, reduce the number of steps, 100 for example. If you desire for 2 revolutions, you could change the degrees to 720, or you can choose reciprocating. And that is how you make an airplane. Thank you for listening. Created by the Industrial Engineering students of Batangas State University. Castillo Shela, Carandang Micaela, De Castro Joelyn, Gonzaga Aubrey, Perez Princess Malnabain.